welcome to a new video. In today's video, we're going to do a little bit about everything solar. That includes removing my flexible solar panels, as well as upgrading my solar system to new panels. So if you're in the market to either upgrade your solar system or install new solar, I think this video may give you a couple of ideas that you may want to incorporate into your install. And the reason I'm upgrading, so I do have 950 watts, but the problem I have is we're at the beginning of October and I get a lot of shading because the sun is lower in the horizon, and my solar performance is basically I get no output at all this time of year. All right, I'm about to take these solar panels off the roof, and if you notice here how much shading I get from the air conditioner. And the other thing I noticed is when they put this die core on here, part of this die core went over the solar cells, so they always get shading no matter what. So I'm going to go ahead and start removing these solar panels. And if you haven't seen my previous videos, there's a little hack that I have to remove this. So this is die core here, and I think they have some VHB tape underneath this as well. But any kind of sealant, it can be this die core or any kind of silicone. You know, obviously you have a scraper, but I also use a torch and warm up this scraper. So I just warm it up a little bit. And you don't want to leave it on the fiberglass for too long. Obviously it can burn in the fiberglass, but if you just keep the momentum going, this stuff comes off relatively easy. It almost like melts and goes through it much easier than trying to do it without applying any kind of heat. So I'll just rinse and repeat. Here's an item I do want to show. So when I take these solar panels off, and this is Dynamax specifically, I don't know if you notice this whole fiberglass here, it's not stuck to the roof here, or not stuck on very good. It lifts up pretty easy off the plywood underneath. So what I will likely do when I install the new solar panels is I will definitely have to add some screws on here, even though I don't want to. But this fiberglass roof is, surprisingly, it's not as strong as the Winnebago fiberglass roof. So I'm a little bit thrown off by that because I would like to install the new solar panels without screws, but there's no way, if you see this, there's no way I would put the new solar panels on here without any kind of screws based on this roof. It looks like it's almost like a floating roof, and they used a little bit of glue. I wish they would have glued this down all the way. But like I said, you can tell there's glue on there, but it just lifts off there. I don't know what their intention was with the glue on here. Now you can see it with the solar panel off a little bit better. Looks like all they used was a little bit of VHB tape on the borders and the die core because it was a flexible panel. I do have some screws I need to patch here. Those are from the actual wire management when they attach the wires to the roof. So kind of funny, they attached the solar panels screw free, but they ended up screwing into the roof for these holes for the wire management. So like I mentioned, this fiberglass is kind of like floating on here. So the new install will definitely use VHB tape, but I think I'll have to attach a couple of screws on here as well. I'll finish taking all these off, and the next step will be, of course, cleaning it and preparing for the new solar panels. Here's a snapshot with all 5 solar panels removed. Took about 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes per panel to remove. And you can see them down there. I think I'll likely just throw those away. I don't know if I can really reuse them. They're pretty poor quality. I might use them as a portable solar panel. We'll see how well they perform as a portable solar panel. But now I got the tougher work coming up, is removing all this residue. It's going to take some patience and good old elbow grease. I will probably have to use some acetone or something like that to cut down on all that Dicor. But that's what I have here. I won't show all the cleaning up procedure. We'll have to patch some holes too. So I'll show you patching the holes and of course installing the solar panels. Alright, we're jumping into patching my holes. So there were some holes left behind from the solar wires. And most of the holes, like this one, there's insulation down below. So when I put caulking in here, it should hit that insulation and then fill back up. So it's not just a void and it all drops through. But I do have this one here. If you look at this one, there's no insulation here. This one is good. So what I'm using is a piece of foam. You could use Baccarat, but I had this foam on hand. And I'm gonna stuff some of this foam down there. I don't know if I can do this with one hand. But we'll stuff some foam down there. And then we'll put the caulking in. That way that caulking doesn't just drop all the way down. I do know that this roofing on here is only 3/8 inch plywood. So very important to have some kind of backing here. Otherwise, like I said, that caulking will just fall right through. There we go. Now you can see that the screwdriver is held there by the foam. So now I'll be able to fill this up with caulking. And then after I'm done with the caulking, I'll put a piece of Eternabond tape over that. There's different ways to do this. This is what I'm going to do. I know these holes are here, but some people put epoxy in. But I figured this is a foolproof way, and by putting a patch job in, I'll always know there was a hole there and don't have to worry about leaks. So next step, we'll clean this up and apply the caulking. Time to fill in this hole with some caulking, and I'm using my usual stuff. This stretch, and I'm gonna make sure that I really pump a lot of caulking down that hole. So I'm trying to aim it down there, and I'm really trying to pump the extra down there. Then at the same time, I have this little squeegee here, and I'm gonna try to squeegee it, trying to push it down until the excess comes out, just like that. So I'll let this dry overnight, and I'll put a piece of Eternabond tape over that. And like I mentioned, I'll always know where the holes were before, but this is relatively easy and foolproof, so that's my plan. Well, here's my last item to do. So if you saw yesterday, I did put some caulking on the hole. And what I didn't show on the camera was I did let it dry, and I had to apply a second round of caulking because it did shrink a little bit. And then here's what I made next. This is Eternabond tape, and you can see here I put some Eternabond tape. I cut them in circles so they look a little bit better, and you have to peel the back off of them. This is always a little bit tricky, but if you put your Eternabond tape in a cooler temperature, like in the refrigerator, for a little while, these little stickers on the back are a little easier to take off. But there's a little film, just like BHB tape. You take that off, and we'll apply that over the hole. And you do want to roll it on there pretty good. So we'll roll that on there, just like that. And then we're done. That was the last one I did. But you can see now on the roof, I've applied the Eternabond tape on everything. So those are all done. So now the more challenging part is I had a heck of a time removing all this Dicor remnant on here. And typically I would use acetone to remove it if it was a little spot. But because I have so much of it, I think I'll have to use way too much acetone, and it'll end up damaging this FRP roof. Well, this is my new method of installation on these solar panels. I'm going to be using Eltrac That is this stuff here. And I'm gonna mount the VHB tape on there. But because of my fiberglass situation where it's not glued down to my roof all the way, I'll be using a combination of VHB tape and screws, unfortunately. So with that, if it was VHB tape only, I would end up using some primer and the tape. But because I'm using a combination of VHB tape and screws, I'm just gonna go ahead and use no primer this time. Hopefully I don't regret it, but I've seen plenty of installations where they don't use the primer at all. But I know when I use the primer, I feel very confident that the tape is not going to come off. So we'll put this 3/4 inch VHB tape. The track I got was 3/4 inch as well. And I'll put links in the video description. So this stuff goes on pretty easy. The challenge, if you've ever used VHB tape, is actually cutting it. And it gets really messy with scissors. So this is what I end up using, is I use a utility knife, and you have to kind of more like slice it. You want to have a sharp knife. That is helpful. And then once you have the tape on there, you want to use one of these rollers and roll that tape on there. So this roller is pretty handy to have on many different projects. But that's just a short guide. But if you see here, this is the track, and there's these little T-bolts. They slide in here like this. So I'll put this down on the roof, and then these T-bolts will be sticking up like this. And how they will be installed is over here. This is my last item I need to put in. I need to put in these solar panel brackets. And this is not the one I got from Bouge RV. So unfortunately, it comes with these little bolts here. But the problem I see with these panels is they have these really large holes. So when you put these bolts in, I had to end up using a washer because the bolt head can end up falling through here. So the other thing I changed, let me go ahead and put this on here, is you'll notice it comes with this nut here too. It has a little serrated edge, so it bites into the metal. And because this is aluminum, it's really soft. I feel pretty confident with it without using a lock washer. It doesn't come with lock washers, but my other trick I'll be doing is, let me get this on here first. So that serrated edge will actually bite into the metal itself, this aluminum, because it's really soft. Let me go over here. So if you look here, what I ended up doing is I ended up putting a double nut system on there. So I put one nut on there, and then I'll lock it in place with a secondary nut once this is snug on there really tight. And what they will do is they will end up fighting each other, and it's basically acting like a really strong lock nut. So if the vibrations go down the road, I'm not just relying on a single nut. So I'll put that secondary nut on. So I am done with all of these. And the next step is really getting on that roof. So let's do that. All right, I got the roof all cleaned up, and I'm about to install these first two panels. So if you notice here, my completed brackets. So I do have this regular solar bracket, and then this track here. And the reason I use the track system is that I can remove these solar panels. Basically, I just unbolt these, and I can pop these solar panels off, and if one gets damaged or if I want to change them out in the future, this track can be left behind. So we're going to go ahead and install this. I put the blue tape on here just as a guide, so when I take that VHB tape off, you'll be basically, you want to get one shot at it once you set it down. So I'll use these little 90-degree blue tape sections here as a guide when I drop the tape. Here we go. We got two solar panels installed with the VHB tape, and you can see here I haven't secured it to the roof yet, but let me pull up on it. You notice when I pull up on it, you see how that existing fiberglass completely pulls up. So I'm definitely going to run, I'll probably use 4 screws on here, and I'll feel better about it. But the actual track itself is on that fiberglass really good. I'll attach some screws and then do some caulking. I will show you that portion. I think people are always interested on how they attach the solar panels to the roof. I wish this fiberglass was attached to the roof a little bit better. I wouldn't even have to use screws if that was the case, but we can't have these solar panels or the whole fiberglass ripping off the roof. So we'll go ahead and finish that up. Then I'm waiting on some brackets to finish up the other 2 panels, and then the final will be I'll do some testing and I'll show you how these 800 watts of solar panels end up doing better than my original 950 watts. I did some preliminary testing, just one panel itself that's not shaded. This panel does better than all my previous solar panels put together, just purely because of the shading. So let's jump on to the next. Alright, I'm going to show you how I install these solar panels by myself here. So you can see the blue tape is marked out already. It's just using it as a guide. When I put the VHB tape down, it's going to be a one and done, so I won't be able to redo it. So what I usually do, it would be a lot easier if you had 2 people, but of course I got to take the VHB tape, the backing off the VHB tape off. Okay, I have the backing off the VHB tape off. I'm just going to use the tape on the other side as a guide with basically I just line up this rail to the tape. So you want to triple check this before you set it down. Then I have the tape on this side to guide it down when I come down. So that's what I'm going to do here before I do a permanent stick. And just like that, let me take this off here. I just use this as a guide, and I'm off a little bit over there, but really it's good enough for what I need it for. And this rail is stuck on there good with VHB tape. So now with that, because unfortunately I showed you before my fiberglass is not attached to the roof very good, I will have to use some screws. So that's my next step. I'll use some screws and caulking, and I'll show you that step. Before I stick this last panel down, I do want to show you what I'm using. I'm using the Bouge RV 200 watt TopCon panels. They are bifacial, as in on the back side. If you look on the back side here, they have cells on the back. Normally this would be all whited out or blacked out so the sun can't pass through, but in between these lines, I don't know if you can see, let me see if I can put my hand on the other side. If you can see my hand on the other side, you can see my fingers coming through, so it will let daylight through. And I don't know how effective these will be, because technically if you have them vertical like this, the light from the back will reflect up and bounce off and hit the cells back here, so you'll get more wattage than a standard panel. But that's really it. The other thing you notice here is this is a 16 BB, 16 bus bars. I'm not up to speed on all the new panels out there, but this seems like one of the newer panels. I'll do a total different video on the performance of these, but just the one panel I've tested already. It's much better than the factory panels, so I'm already satisfied the way I have it. Alright, here's my next step. I'm going to drill a hole here, and a mistake, I won't say a mistake, but when I bought these rails, it came with some really small screws, and I'm upgrading to these number 10 screws. They're a little bit bigger in diameter. I just want it to have a little bit more bite than those tiny screws it came with. Unfortunately, these heads are pretty big, or bigger than what this countersink in this rail is. So I'm using this countersink bit here, and I'm going to widen that. So when I put the screw in, it'll be flush with that bottom rail. Otherwise, that T-bolt, this bolt that slides in here, it can catch on this screw if this screw head is up too high. So that's, I'll show you that process right now. going to test this countersink to make sure this head goes flush first before I caulk this. But I am going to use a manual screwdriver here. I think the manufacturers, if you've seen my other videos, they have a tendency to way over tighten or end up stripping the screws because they use that drill. But the camera's not going to pick it up, but now my screw head sits flush. So I feel good with that. And what I'm going to do is with this screw here, I'm using my usual, this DAP stretch. I'm going to fill that hole with this and have this screw go in flush. Then after I'm all done, I'll put a dab of Dicor, the self-leveling Dicor on top. That will shed the water away, but this will be the actual waterproofing membrane, not the Dicor itself. The caulking will do the waterproofing. So let me see if I can squeeze some in here. You really want to fill those voids in that hole as much as you can. I also have just a little screwdriver. I want to push that caulking down that hole, deeper down that hole. So like I mentioned, I want to make sure that this is waterproofed good. I'll put some on this screw as well. Probably more than what I really need to get this waterproofed. But I'll feel better about it knowing that this is going to be watertight. And just like that, I just made it snug. You don't want to end up stripping that screw out. So I'm going to take that extra caulking out with this. So that way if I ever want to remove these panels, I'm going to end up putting a little dab of caulking on top as well and work it in with my finger just to cover that screw hole. And then I will end up like I mentioned, using that Dicor. So I'm just cleaning up this excess caulking here, but that should be it. That should be a nice watertight solution. And I'll put the Dicor on as a last step, and I'll show you that. But my plan is to put 2 screws up in the front. This is if there's any wind, this front end is going to catch most of the wind. And then a screw probably closer to the center and 1 screw on the end. But I'll show you the final finished project after that. I don't think you need to see each and every hole. There's many methods or many ways to do this, so I'm only showing you what I'm doing. Well, I'm getting ready to wrap up here, and we're very close to the finished project. So these 2 panels in the back, they're 100% complete, as well as this panel in the front. This panel over there, I do have to make a repair on that, and I'll show you that. But let me show you what I have is these panels are completely done. If you notice here, I did end up putting a second nut on here. These are nylock nuts, probably way overkill, but I did want to do that. I did put a layer of Dicor on the inside and the outside of the track so no water can slip underneath that VHB tape. And then where I had the actual screws, obviously I used the caulking, but on top of that I put a layer of Dicor on top of that. And then over here, you will see I did all the wire management with zip ties, and I used these little feet right here. They're just on there with a double stick tape and a zip tie on top. And that's really it. Really happy with the performance of these panels. I'll do a total separate video on that. And going up to the front, let me show you the mistakes I made. So up in the front here, here is a mistake that I did make. Is this particular RV has some roof trusses or metal roof trusses that go along the roof. And this screw, when I installed this screw, I did end up hitting a metal truss. And when I torqued down the screw itself, the top of the head broke off. So I'll have to extract that with those needle nose vice grips here. But the other thing is, I don't know if I would use these number 10 screws again. So these are sheet metal screws. They can be used for wood, But the problem with sheet metal screws are they have really fine or finer they have finer threads on them than wood screws. And this plywood here that's underneath this FRP roof is only the 3/8 inch plywood, so it's really thin, and these just do not have enough bite on them. So if I had to do it again, I would probably use wood screws with I'll call it the coarse thread screws. And then the other thing is with the heads. These heads are much bigger than what came with this track. And what that created is I had to make my own countersink, which of course duplicates the work, but you can over countersink is in a couple of the holes I actually drilled out too much of it, and the top of the screw head actually went all the way through. So I'll have to fix that. But aside from that, you can see I put the inside layer of Dicor on here. I still have to do this exterior side, and that's why I wanted to have these tracks instead of just attaching these feet to the roof directly. If you do that, you won't be able to take these panels off without undoing everything. Here I can just simply take this solar panel off by just removing them from these T-bolts. So I can at least maintain and check underneath the roofing. But I'll do a total separate video on the performance of these panels as well as the fusing. So I'm not going to show you the fusing on these. I didn't end up putting any fuses up on top. I only have 2 panels per solar controller, so you don't need to have fuses up on top, but you will have to have fuses on the bottom. But I'll do a separate video on why I'm doing it my way. And that's really it. You know, there's many different ways to do it. So I'm just showing you the ways that I'm doing it. And if you want to duplicate any of this, it's a pretty simple process. And again, this track it's relatively inexpensive to install it this method. I might show you the performance of these panels, but I think you'll just have to take my word for it. They work about 100 times better than what the factory provided. So we'll see you on the next video.